Hi, I'm Kathy from Stitch It Together. Isn't this a beautiful quilt? This is a 10-degree round Bargello quilt. And while it might look very complicated, it really is very simple to make. Let's talk about the things you're going to need to make this quilt. So as I made mine, I'm going to end up with two different quilt tops, two separate ones that are 55 inches long. So when you are buying your fabric, just understand that you're buying enough to make two quilt tops from this. So let's begin. You're going to need 12 fabrics, and they need to be 5/8 of every fabric. That is going to be enough fabric to get you your strip sets. You will need a backing fabric. So you're going to need enough fabric to have a probably 60 by 60 square. So if you can find Minky, that's what I'm going to use to back this one. I would need Minky that is 60 inches wide and then 60 inches down. And because I have two, I just went and bought 4 yards. But if you're not going to use Minky, you will need to then piece together your enough for 60 inches approximately. And so you would need to do the math to do that. And then I have allowed myself a ½ yard for the binding. So let me also tell you that you're going to need to buy a 10-inch or a 10-degree wedge. There are a lot of different brands of these, and there are a lot of different sizes. I needed one where the length was going to be, allow me to do at least 24.5 inches, because the strip sets that I'm making, since they have 12 fabrics in them, are going to be 24.5 inches wide when I go to cut the wedges out of them. So you will need to check with your brand. I'm using right here one by Phillips Fiber Art, and they have a website, phillipsfiberart.com, and they also have a lot of videos. So if you want another video that might show you close to the one that I'm making here, this is still my own design, you might try their website as well. But yeah, you're going to need a 10-degree wedge. So a 10-degree wedge means that there will be 36 of these, because a circle is 360 degrees. I will need 36 wedges in order to make a complete circle. Okay, so let me tell you how you make these strip sets. This is what worked for me. One of the differences in how I cut this fabric out is that usually when you cut your fabric, you're going to cut from selvage to selvage. And so this quilt, the way that I made it, you're not going to do that. You're going to cut parallel. So your strips are not going to go this way. You're going to cut them this way. So your strips are all going to be 2.5 inches wide by 5/8, or about 22 to 23 inches long. And you're going to want to make 12 2.5 by 22.5 to 23 inch strips for every single color. And then once you have your strips cut, you need to figure out what order you want to have them in, and you're going to label them very, very well. One of the things that is harder about this quilt, the sewing is very easy, is you need to make sure that you're very organized, because your orientation of your strips matters and the order that you have your strips matters. So you need to be very well organized and make sure you label everything accordingly. So once you have the order that you want them in, make sure you take stickers and put your numbers in the order that they're going to be in. And then for safekeeping, I would take a picture of that order with the numbers on them, so that if something, heaven forbid, should happen, you have a backup system. So otherwise it will be very hard for these to go together if you mess up that order. So place all your fabrics in a line. So you would have stacks of 12 of each color, and then you're going to start sewing. And as you sew, you're going to want to press your seam in one direction. So all of your seams for each strip set is going to go in one direction, but you're going to alternate. So if you start with an odd number, let's say your number 1 strip set, you're going to press all the seams towards the left. And for all of your even, you're going to press these seams towards the right. So just make sure that you're doing that consistently, and when you go to sew these together, everything's just going to fit right together. You might not even need to use pins. So you start with your strip sets that have 12 in each strip set, and you're going to start with the number 1, and you're going to sew them all together. Then you're going to take the one that's on the end, and you're going to move it. And then you're going to sew another strip strip set, just like that one, until you have 12. You're going to continue on that manner, changing the one that's on the right-hand side and moving it over to the left-hand side until you have 12 completely different strip sets. But as you are finishing your strip sets, your orientation is going to matter. Because if I turn this upside down, the fabrics wouldn't be in the same direction. They wouldn't be in the same order. So you need to make sure that your orientation is marked, as well as what number every one of your strip sets starts with, because that's going to matter. So once you do that, then you're going to be ready to sew your wedges. So what I have done with my wedge, again, I need to have a wedge that is at least 24.5 inches long, and mine happens to be longer than that. So to help myself out, I measured using the straight line that's in the middle of my wedge, and I measured up 24.5 inches, and then I put tape right here at the 24.5 inch mark. So I would always know where my edge needs to meet. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut 6 wedges. They're going to be 3 in one direction and 3 in the other direction. And you're going to take this line right here that you've marked, this line on your wedge, and you're going to line it up with the side of your fabric right there, and you're going to cut your first wedge. Then you're going to reverse your wedge, and you're going to cut from this direction. And for posterity's sake, if your strips are not perfectly straight and they're not exactly 24.5 inches, just be consistent about which end you're always going to bring up to the top. Now for me, my strips were pretty consistently 24.5 inches wide, like they should have been, but not perfect. And so I always made sure that this piece of tape was the one that was always on the edge. So if I was over or off, it was always going to be on the narrow end. And the narrow end, I'm going to be putting fabric around in the center of it anyway. So for me, it made sense to make sure that this one was always the one that was perfectly lined up. And if there was going to be any wiggle room, it was going to be on the side that's going to eventually get covered up with fabric anyway. So that's what you're going to do. You should end up with 3 going in one direction and 3 going in the other direction. And it matters that you make sure that you label one set A and one set B. And then you need to be consistent. And what I mean by consistent, you can't call this direction A in one set of strips and then call it B in the next. You need to make sure that the ones going in this direction and you're orienting the same way every single time. And you're going to collect all of your A blocks. They're going to make one quilt, and all of your B blocks are going to make another quilt. So I've already made the A blocks, and you've seen that quilt. So what you will end up with is a bunch of wedges that you have labeled. And these are my B set, and they're labeled 1 through 12. And I will have 3 identical wedges. And so that will make 3 new strip sets that are going to be a third of a circle. So I'm going to go ahead and sew the wedges together. And because they alternate the direction of the fabric when I press them, the seams alternate. When I line them up to go sew 1 through 12 together, the seams should match up pretty easy. And I did not need to use pins. So as long as you're consistent, you might need to use pins, you might not. So you're going to end up with 3 new strip sets that are a third of a circle each, 1 through 12. And then you're just going to sew the 12 together and a 12 together and 12 together. You're going to end up with a circle. But you are going to have a hole in the middle of your circle in the interior. And how big that hole is going to depend on which system that you have used. For me, the hole, the actual size of the hole, I think is 6 inches. I think it's 6 inches. So what I did to cover the hole is I made a circle of fabric that was 7.5 inches big. I cut 2 of them, and then let me show you what I did. So what I did was I made 2 7.5 inch circles of a fabric that I liked, this one right here, and then I put them right sides together, and I stitched around a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Then I took that circle, because remember there's 2, the right sides are together, and I pulled one up and I just put a small slit in it, and then I turned it so that the right sides are out. Then I just placed the circle on, I put the wedge, all the wedges that are now in a circle, on a very flat surface, and I pinned it. I just pinned it into the opening right like that, and then I top stitched it, and that's really all there was to it. And so I know that this quilt looks like it's really complicated, but it truly isn't. And I hope you'll give it a try. If you have any questions, I am at Kathy at Stitch It Together LLC. You can find me on Facebook. Thanks for watching.